The last few weeks we've been looking at raising the bar in different areas of our life, including faith, excellence, what's the others? Forgiveness. They made a big, deep impression on me, as you can tell. Forgiveness and integrity. Andy spoke on integrity last week, which is a really big challenge. So when we think of raising the bar, raising the standard, that's what it means. It's a challenge to overcome. Like the picture says, it's raising the bar in our own lives, as in like a high jump. And as I was thinking about pulling this together, Lois phoned me, and like she does every day, she phones me. So she says, I have a parents' evening, went brilliant last night. I said, that's really good. It's Caris's parents' evening. She said, yeah, it was brilliant, really good. She's so clever. I went, that's good, that's really helpful. And the English teacher said to her, yeah, she's doing really well in reading and writing, and her reading's really good. But she says, but actually, she could do better. And what she needs to do to get better is to read books that are harder for her. Because she can read all the books that we give her at the minute, so she thinks she's really good, which she is. But she could be better if she read books that were more challenging for her. Yeah. And she actually said, and then Lois said, you see, by Caris reading harder books, it's causing her to raise the bar in her life, and she'll achieve more and go further. I said, I can't believe you said that. That is our topic, about raising the bar. And so she said, if she does this, she will raise the bar in her reading skills, and she will go to a higher level. And that's why we're addressing this subject today. Some of us are really good at other subjects we've already addressed at raising the bar, but we can be better. We can go further. When you think of hospitality, you might be fantastic at it. The best person showing hospitality in the whole church. But you can go better. Because this is why we're addressing this subject, is that ourselves included go better and raising the bar. So, hospitality. What comes to you when I say that word? Rhetorical question. Before Janine jumps up with an explanation. Hospitality. It's not about being a better cook, okay? Well, I mean, it could be, but it's not just about that. In case you think, hospitality is cooking, I didn't really want to come to church, you're about cooking. So, and it's not really about, you give people a sandwich, so now I'm going to learn how to give them a steak. It's not just about that. Hospitality is about encouragement in generosity. And so it affects every one of us in our lives today. God wants us to grow in hospitality so we can be a blessing to others, and we can be blessed in ways we've never dreamt of. So we're all generous to an extent, but today we're looking at raising the bar in our hospitality, in areas of hospitality. Now, Rick Warren, brilliant preacher, he said this statement: generosity is love in action. He went on to say, you can give without loving, but you cannot love without giving. If we truly love, then we will be generous. We will be hospitable towards one another. It's quite a sentence to grasp hold of. If you can give without loving, so you can just give to people without loving. Okay, there's a need, I can give there. I can do this. I don't particularly like the people. They're okay, they're just do my head in, but there's a need there, so I can give. Okay, so you can give without loving, but if you say you're loving, then you will automatically give, because you can't love without giving. And to illustrate this, I was just thinking, if Phil says to me, every day I love you, which he doesn't say to me every day he loves me, but I know that he does love me. So if he says, I love you every day, I think, that's really nice, he loves me, that's really great. But then after a period of time, if I was making dinner and we came to the arrangement that dinner's going to be at 6 o'clock every single night, and we both agreed to that, and then day after day, week after week, he turns up at 8 o'clock, then I will start to think, he says he loves me, but yet we've got this agreement, yet he don't think about me, he comes in late every single night. What's all that about? I mean, it's not too much to ask, is it? I mean, not that he does this every night. But then I will start to question, does he actually love me? Because he's not giving in that area we've agreed to. So we can give without loving, but we can't love without giving. And so hospitality is all about that. It's about being generous, loving and generous to each other and to others. And I want us to look at the woman in the Bible today in 2 Kings chapter 4. I think it will come up there, I'm not sure. And it's about the Shunammite woman. And this story has really struck me. There's a few verses I'm going to read, and I'm going to read them. I tried to cut it a bit short, but it's a really good passage, and it illustrates all about the subject of hospitality. 2 Kings 4, 8 to 37, and I'm reading from the Message Bible. One day, Elisha passed through Shunem. A leading lady of the town talked him into stopping for a meal, and then it became his custom. Whenever he passed through, he stopped by for a meal. I'm certain, said the woman to her husband, that this man who stops by with us all the time is a holy man of God. Why don't we add on a small room upstairs and furnish it with a bed and a desk, chair and lamp, so that when he comes by, he can stay with us? And so it happened that the next time Elisha came by, he went to the room and lay down for a nap. Then he said to his servant Gehazi, tell the Shunammite woman I want to see her. He called her, and she came to him. Through Gehazi, Elisha said, you've gone far beyond the call of duty in taking care of us. What can we do for you? Do you have a request we can bring to the king or to the commander of the army? She replied, nothing. I'm secure and satisfied in my family. Elisha conferred with Gehazi, there's got to be something we can do for her, but what? Gehazi said, well, she has no son, and her husband is an old man. Call her in, said Elisha. He called her in, and she stood at the open door. Elisha said to her, this time next year you're going to be nursing an infant son. Oh, my master, oh, holy man, she said, don't play games with me, teasing me with such fantasies. The woman conceived. A year later, just as Elisha said, she had a son. The child grew up. One day he went to his father, who was working with the harvest to hands, complaining, my head, my head. His father ordered a servant, carry him to his mother. The servant took him in his arms and carried him to his mother. He lay on her lap until noon and died. She took him up and laid him on the bed of the man of God and shut him in alone and left. Then she called her husband, get me a servant and a donkey so I can go to the holy man. I'll be back as soon as I can. Down to 27. But when she reached the holy man at the mountain, she threw herself at his feet and held tightly to him. Gehazi came up to pull her away, but the holy man said, leave her alone. Can't you see that she's in distress? But God hasn't let me in on why. I'm completely in the dark. Then she spoke up. Did I ask for a son, master? Didn't I tell you? Don't tease me with false hopes. He ordered Gehazi, don't lose a minute. Get my staff and run as fast as you can. If you meet anyone, don't take any time to greet them. If anyone greets you, don't even answer. Lay my staff across the boy's face. The boy's mother said, as sure as God lives and you live, you're not leaving me behind. And so Gehazi let her take the lead and followed behind. But Gehazi arrived first and laid the staff across the boy's face, but there was no sound, no sign of life. Gehazi went back to meet Elisha and said, the boy hasn't stirred. Elisha entered the house and found the boy stretched out on the bed dead. He went into the room and locked the door, just the two of them in the room, and prayed to God. He then got onto the bed with the boy and covered him with his body, mouth on mouth, eyes on eyes, hands on hands. As he was stretched out over him like that, the boy's body became warm. Elisha got up and paced back and forth in the room. Then he went back and stretched himself out on the boy again. The boy started sneezing. 7 times he sneezed and opened his eyes. He called Gehazi and said, get the Shunammite woman in here. He called her and she came in. Elisha said, embrace your son. She fell at Elisha's feet, face to the ground, and in reverent awe. Then she embraced her son and went out with him. I read that because I tried to appreciate, but it's really detailed, and it's a really good story and gives all the details that we need. But basically, here was this woman known as the Shunammite woman. She didn't even have a name. And it's like saying the Hansworth woman. You know, it's relevant to us where we are today. It's like the Hansworth woman. Well, she was known as the Shunammite woman. And she saw this man coming by and thought, well, I could be hospitable to him. I'm going to look after him. I'll give him a meal every time he walks by. So she gave him a meal. And then as she noticed that, well, his journey was long, it was tiresome, and then she decided to go a step further. Instead of just giving him a meal, she said to her husband, let's set aside a room for him, a little room, so we can go in there, he can rest. They put a table, a lamp, and a bed in there, and he can rest. So she went a stage further in her hospitality. And as a result of that, Elisha came to her and said, I'm going to bless you with a gift. And although she was happy and she made that really clear, I don't really need anything, he said, I'm still going to do this. And he saw that she needed a son, which was something very relevant in those days. And she gave him a son, and that was the gift he gave to her. And then that came to pass, and she did have he prophesied that she would have a son, and she had the son within a year. There's lots of things in that story we could highlight, but we're just basically looking today at generosity, at hospitality. And this is the lady who did something simple as this, and she's gone down in history. Over thousands of years, and thousands of people have read about it. And she did something as simple as that. See, sometimes we think we've got to do something mighty and marvelous and wonderful in order to get God to bless us. But it was something like that. She saw it, she met it, and she's gone down in history for what she's done. She was generous, and as a result of that, God rewarded her. So the first thing I want us to see from this story is God pours out his blessing on us when we're generous. Verses 16 and 17, what we just read, said, this time next year, you're going to be nursing an infant son. And just as Elisha said, she had a son. She was rewarded for her hospitality. Proverbs 22:9 says, the generous people will be blessed because they share their food with the poor. Proverbs 11:25 says, a generous man will prosper. I'm deliberately reading these scriptures out because we need to take this on board, these scriptures. It's not just a nice thing. Oh, yes, I'll do a nice thing for somebody, and then maybe God will bless me. If we are generous, then this is what God's going to do for us. He's going to definitely bless us. 2 Corinthians 9 says, you will be enriched so that you can give more. I mean, I can't say I'm particularly great in this area myself. Like Andy said last week, we're up here and we're speaking on these topics, and we're not up here because this is my forte, so I'm up here and I'm gonna speak about this. Like Andy said, he's sharing on integrity, so he said, don't look at me for the example. And I know there's tons of people in this room that really show hospitality in a fantastic way. And I look at them and I think, I don't think I could have done that. Yeah. That's a really amazing thing. And so we're not up here because of that, and particularly I don't think, I like opening my home and I like doing things like that, but I know I can raise the bar in this area. And so we're not up here because we're the example, but it's because we want to draw our attention to scriptures like this so we can be blessed and grab hold of the scriptures and do these things so God can pour his blessing out on us. This lady, when she saw Elisha passing by, she saw him and he could have just walked by, but she looked at him and she saw his need. And sometimes we can say, well, yeah, I'll meet a need. I'll help anybody. But are we actually looking? Are we keeping our eyes open and our ears open to our conversations that we have with people, not just in here, but outside, and our neighbors and our friends and our colleagues? Are we actually targeting in on something that somebody says and you think, oh, I'm going to pick up on that. I'm going to do something about that. Because this is what we need to do. We need to do this. We need to keep our eyes and our hearts open to see what's going on. And when we bless other people with generosity, we will be blessed ourselves. We can never outgive God. The Bible says the more we give to others, the more we're going to get back in return. And so when we are generous, God pours out his blessing. Secondly, when we are generous, God protects us. You can see that from this story. When I started reading it and wondering what topic to use in speaking about this, and when I started looking into it, I really saw that God does protect you when you're generous. And I saw some scriptures, and I want to share them with you in a minute, but they are really powerful scriptures. I mean, when Leah said to me, I've noticed your topic is hospitality. Oh, you're really good at that. And she said, it's just up your street. And I'm thinking, I actually said to her, yeah, but it's not just getting up here saying, I used to make a sandwich, but now I'm doing steak. I said, it's not as simple as that. It's really complicated in one sense because it's challenging. Not so much complicated, it's challenging. Because, when you look into a word, you're challenged by it yourself. And I thought to myself, I can definitely raise the bar in this area. I need to be more generous. And so we see that God protected the Shunammite woman, when she was generous to the Spirit of God and to Elisha. You know, none of us, as many of us know here today, none of us are exempt from tough times. Yeah. And just because we're Christians, we're definitely not exempt from them. We're the same as anybody else. It's just we've got somebody to help us. Yeah. That's what makes us the difference. Right. In fact, we know for definite that tough times will come, because in John 16 it says, in this world you will have trouble. Yeah. So Jesus has said that, so we shouldn't really be surprised by it. He said, you'll have trouble, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. Yeah. And storms will come to every one of us, and it won't be easy, like the storm came to this woman. But God can answer us in the storms. In fact, talking about God answering us and bringing a word to us and coming to answer us in our storm, as I was actually writing this, my phone went, and I started to write, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. And just as I finished writing that, my phone rang. So I answered the phone, and it was friends of ours who were in the ministry, and they are really going through a tough time with quite a few other ministers. And it's a really tough, challenging time. And I was chatting away to her, and then I actually said, you know, I've just written this. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. I said, I've actually just written that and stopped writing it to answer the phone. So I believe that was a word for them. It wasn't a coincidence that she phoned at that moment. And so, you see, God comes to us in our storms. He doesn't take us out of our storms. He takes us through them with his help. But he always comes to help us in them. And when we think of this woman in this story, this was a devastating thing that happened to her. Great that she got a son that she wasn't expecting, but devastating that he died. And she wasn't expecting that. Probably she was thinking, where's God in all of this? I didn't really ask for this. I was happy. I already told him I was happy with everything. And now I got an extra blessing, and now it seems it's gone and taken away from me. And when this happened, she went and sought out Elisha, and the scripture says she threw him at his feet to ask for help. Psalm 112 says, all goes well for the righteous, the hospitable man, who conducts his business fairly. Such a man, such a generous man, will not be overthrown by evil circumstances. God's constant care of him will make a deep impression on all who see it. So you see, this lady, she sowed generously, and she was going after a reward. With her sowing, in her relationship, because she built a relationship with Elisha, she said, right, I'm doing something about this. This isn't right. And so she went and she sought after him, and she sought an audience with him, because in those days, there was 3 people that really could hear from the Lord, who was the king, the priest, and the prophet. And you just didn't really go up to prophets and throw themselves on their feet and grab hold of them. That's why we read that Gehazi was pushing her away and said, you can't do this. But because she had a relationship with him, because she showed hospitality to him, she had the right to have access to him. And so he said, no, leave her. This is fine. There's something wrong. I need to see her. I need to speak to her. There's something terrible wrong. And it's because she showed hospitality. If she hadn't shown hospitality to him all that time before, she wouldn't have been able to have had access to him and receive prayer from him. In that scripture in Psalm 112, it says, God's constant care of him will make a deep impression on all who see it. God's constant care. So constant is constant. It means always. It's forever. So God's constant care is always care, is with us all the time, even when we don't feel it. His care is not with us just in the troubled times, but his care is with us in the good times. And this poor woman thought, well, where's God now? I'm sure she didn't feel like God's presence was with her. So he is always looking after us and protecting us. And so this is what I want to bring out here. God protects us as we are generous. You know, if you feel you've lost out on something, if you feel you've lost something today, you might have lost your job, or you might have lost your dream. Or if you feel you're here today and think, well, I just didn't think life was going to map out like this. God's gifts are always good to us. He says he will always give good gifts to his children. And so even at the moment you might think, well, this isn't a good gift. It might be a storm you're going through. But he says he will never leave us or forsake us, and he will always be in the storm with us. So within the storm, he will be giving us good gifts, and he will be protecting us from evil. In Psalm 91 it says he will give his angels, he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways, and unless you fall down and hit your foot against a stone. How brilliant is that? God, with all those myriad and myriads of angels, he's sending them out to look after us, to protect us, to stand guard over us, to take care of us. And that is what definitely happens when God sends his angels out. A while ago, Phil, it was quite a number of years ago, when we were in a church in Bedworth, he was walking down the road, and as he's walking down the road, there's shops either side, so wherever he was going, and he was walking down the road, and as he was walking down this pavement, down this way, wherever he was going, he heard, he said, when he looked back, he said it was almost like an audible voice. It was so loud. He just heard a voice that said to him, "Stop!" So it was so loud that it shocked him. So he just stood like that. And then within a second, a whole pane of toughened glass on the top of a storeroom of this shop fell out right in front of him and crashed in front of him. And he said it was one of those pane glass windows. It was huge. And he said just crashed out in front of him. And he said, because it was toughened glass as well, he said he probably would have been killed. Definitely seriously injured. And then when he looked back, he said, I think that was an angel. He said it was so, you just don't stop like that when you're walking for no reason. And he said, I felt, afterwards when he looked back, he said there was something there that made me, I couldn't go any further. And I believe that was an angel that stopped him do that. A while later, we went to visit Phil's mum and dad, and when they lived in Rill. And all the family went there, and the kids were playing outside. And they got a little enclosed area at the front of their house. And Joe was playing outside with his bike. And then he comes back inside. I think he was about 7-ish. And he comes back in, and we're all laughing and talking. And then we heard Joel saying something about something. And I went, just a second, what are you saying? And he said, there was a man outside in a white van. And he stopped. And he wound the window down and said, do you want to come in my van for some sweets? Well, you can imagine, it just freaked us out. And we went, oh my goodness, this is terrible. Tell us again what you said. Tell us again what you said. Are you sure? Well, we called the police. And they came to the house and interviewed us and stuff. And they said, well, actually, there was an incident further down the road where the van there took a child. And I think somebody pulled the child out. And I thought, that could have been Joel. And so we have to believe that God is in situations like that and not to go, oh, that was okay then. I believe that an angel could have been stood there between Joel and that van. And Joel turned round and went back to the house to tell us. That's not almost normal for a child to do that. And so I firmly believe that. And the scripture says, do not forget to entertain strangers, for by doing so, some people have entertained angels without knowing it. And so I can't say we were entertaining angels. Phil wasn't really entertaining angels as he stood there and felt the word stop. But I believe in sowing those seeds wherever we can. It's giving God opportunity to bless us and to protect us from things that we say God protects us from things when we see, oh, that was a near miss. But what about all the other things that we don't know anything about, that God's protected us from and shielded us from? And so it's things like that. So if we sow in areas, we will definitely reap in areas. But what a testimony this woman had. What a brilliant testimony then she had for her friends and her neighbours. Her son had been raised back from the dead. I'm sure she was telling everybody, which she probably didn't have to tell everybody. They could see for themselves. So she had a brilliant testimony. And sometimes when we go through these storms, we go, oh, what's the point of all this? What's the point of all this? But I really believe that we have to look for God in all the storms so that when we come out, We've got a testimony to give, because you can't have a testimony without having the test and with going through the test, unfortunately. But that's part of the testimony. And last week, Andy said the people are watching us. You know, it's not to bring pressure on us, and we're not men pleasers, absolutely not. But people are watching us, and we do things. You know, when I used to work in offices and things, and see different things going off and everything, and I'd do something, and maybe think, oh, I'll take that pencil home with me, you know, like you do. And then maybe you don't. I mean, I wouldn't do that now. But when you do that sort of thing, somebody goes, oh, I thought you were a Christian. Yeah. And you say, oh yeah, I'm only borrowing it. And that's what they all say. And I think, how did she know I was a Christian? I've never really spoken to them ever before. But they know, people know. They just know there's something different about you. They can't help but see there's something different about you. And so people are watching us. When I was 18, my mother died. And I was the eldest of 5 children. And my youngest brother was 5 at the time. So there was 5 of us. And as you can imagine, it was a horrible time. And I know people were watching me, because I was a Christian, and my family, I was the only Christian in the family, and my family used to say to me, oh yeah, she's got that religious mania. She wants to go to church all the time. She's reading the Bible all the time. And so when this happened, I just felt, you know, they're going to be watching me. Yeah. And they're going to be thinking, oh, I bet she won't bother now. I bet she'll blame God for this. I bet it'll all crumble and fall. Wonder if she'll keep going. And I felt really impressed to hang on to God for all I was worth, and to reveal God to people that were watching me, to see what would happen, because I really wanted this testimony for them to see, you know, maybe she has got something. Maybe there is something in her life. I want what she's got. So I really praying that happened at that time, and I felt it was really important. So if you're going through difficult times, don't give up. If you're in a storm, don't give up. You always come through to the other side when you've got Jesus with you, and he'll be with you through your storm. And the third thing through the story I saw was God positions us for success. I'm sure when this lady showed hospitality to Elisha, things like that were the furthest most from her mind, furthest most thoughts from her mind. She wasn't thinking about success. She already actually was a successful woman. We were told she was very wealthy. And that was unusual for people in those days, for women in those days, especially when to be highlighted that she was very wealthy. And it doesn't say they were, they said she was. So there's a lot of history probably there that goes on. We haven't got time to look into that. But so she was wealthy. She had plenty. So she wasn't looking for success. She just did what she found her hand needed to do. And she provided hospitality. She was generous. And so, but the Lord positioned her for success for later on. She was sowing seeds for her and her family in that situation there. And she didn't realize what she was doing. She just thought she was living a good life, being okay. Then she got blessed with a son. And then he died. Then he got restored back again. And she probably thought, oh, this is really wonderful. But later on in Kings chapter 8, we see her again. And I didn't realize, actually, that she was further into Kings. I thought it ended there. But when you see in Kings chapter 8, and I'm going to read it because I found this really exciting. So when she showed that hospitality to Elisha, like I said, she was just doing it for that moment. She wasn't thinking of the future. She just was generous. She just did what we said, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. And that's what she was doing. But I want to read something in 2 Kings 8, and I find this really amazing. Years before, Elisha had told the woman whose son he had brought to life. He's saying now to the Shunammite woman, leave here and go, you and your family, and live someplace else. God has ordered a famine in the land. It will last for 7 years. The woman did what the holy man told her and left. She and her family lived as aliens in the country of Philistia for 7 years. Then when the 7 years were up, the woman and her family came back, and she went directly to the king and asked for her home and farm. The king was talking to Gehazi, the servant to the holy man, saying, So this was the king now going to Elisha's servant, and he was saying, "Oh, tell me some of the stories of the great things Elisha did." It so happened that as he was telling the king the story of the dead person that Elisha brought back to life, the woman whose son was brought back to life showed up, asking at that precise moment for her home and farm. Now, normally when they abandoned things like that, that was it. They never got them back again, because that was it if you abandoned them in those days. Gehazi said, "My master the king, this is the woman, and this is her son whom Elisha brought back to life." The king wanted to know all about it, and so she told him the story. The king assigned an officer to take care of her, saying, "Make sure she gets everything back that's hers, plus all the profits from the farm from the time she left until now." Now, I found that really fantastic. I found that amazing. So you see, we can sow seeds and we are generous, and you can think, you just do it and not think twice about it. And it'll have repercussions in time to come. And so I want to encourage us today to raise the bar. Raise the bar in our generosity. Raise the bar in what God's called us to do in our hospitality. She was in the right place at the right time, years later. I mean, that's something. That was a God moment for her at that moment. And she had the right. She had the right for that because of what she had done years before. You know, sometimes we do things and we're expecting an immediate blessing or an immediate handout. Or when we pray for healing, an immediate healing. Or we pray for an answer to prayer and we want it there and then because we're into what they say, the microwave era. We want everything instantly. But you know, we need to be faithful. We need to keep being faithful and keep sowing and sowing. And we definitely will reap a reward. Even if it's years down the road, we will reap a reward. 1 Timothy 6 says, "Use your money to do good. By doing this, you will be storing up real treasure for yourselves in heaven. It's the only safe investment for eternity. And you will be living a fruitful Christian life down here as well." Luke 16:9 says, "Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. In this way, your generosity stores up a reward for you in heaven." So what's our reward when we get to heaven? We're encouraged to be generous on this earth with our money, with our time, with our worldly possessions, sharing with one another, and helping one another in areas where they need help. And when we do this, we'll store up a reward in heaven. So what do we think our reward in heaven is? I just thought, it got me thinking about all sorts of things. Oh, maybe I might rule over this. If I do this, maybe I'll get a mansion. Maybe I'll get this. You might be thinking, well, you know, if I do this, I might get the biggest harp anybody's ever had. I'll get the best harp and I'll be there on this fantastic cloud and all this. But you know, we're told in Scripture that our reward will be seeing people in heaven because of what we've sown generously. That's our reward. You might be thinking here today, well, I do my bit. So if I'm generous, I'm going to see, how will I see people in heaven? How will I know that those people are there because of me? And you know, you can sow in lots of different areas. And we're not just talking about money. We can give food to the food bank. That's being generous. We can sponsor a young person to go to camp. That's being generous. And we're talking at the moment, we're raising funds for the building. But it's not even just about that. It's our time. It's the time that we give. You know, it's the cleaning of this place. So all sorts of things like that. And because we are sowing generously, we will reap reward. And it could be that when you sow to somebody will see that. And they'll say, you know, I think I'm going to come to church. I think it seems a good place. I think I'm going to go there. And so we never know when we're sowing generously whose hearts we are touching and whose hearts we're making an impact on. I used to give end-of-life care to people in their own homes, mainly who were dying from cancer. And I absolutely loved my job. And it was this firm that I worked for a firm quite a few years ago. And I worked for this firm, and it was like a pilot scheme in Sheffield. And they were based at Leeds. And so they advertised for the jobs, and there was about 6 of us. And then it got down to 4 of us. They had no clue about the geographic site of Sheffield, because they operated from Leeds. And so they used to send us from one place, one side of the city, to the other side of the city, and we'd go back and forth, back and forth. And basically at the end, they just said, you know what, we can't do this. This is costing us so much money. We're paying you guys, but it's costing us more in the long run because of petrol expenses and all stuff like that. So some of my friends thought, oh, this is going to end. So my colleagues, so they got jobs somewhere else. So I was just the last one left. And there was one person left in our care. And I started going to visit this guy before we thought it was coming to an end, the service. And I started looking after this guy, and I had to be at his home for 8 o'clock in the morning. And it was a 40-mile round trip. And in the end, he was our last patient because they didn't take any more on board because they were closing the service. And he was the last patient. And so he was on my patch, my books. So I used to go and look after him every morning. So it was a 40-mile round trip for a 45-minute visit every morning. And so I went there every day. And I just went in, did it, came back. And he was a very intelligent guy. He used to be a headmaster, so he was very intelligent. He was quite well-to-do, and he lived with his wife. And I absolutely loved going to see him. And we had the most amazing conversations. But he said, well, I'm an atheist. I'm agnostic. So don't talk to me about anything to do with God. And I never, ever talked to him about God. It was because he said to me, what do you do? And what does your husband do? So then I shared it with him. He said, oh, that's really interesting. He said, oh, well, I'm an atheist and agnostic. So, okay, that's fine. And so I just used to go into him every morning. And every morning used to say, it's Sunday today. So what's your husband preaching on today? And I said, oh, okay, because you can't really say anything to people like that when you're caring for them unless they instigate the conversation. You've got to be really careful. And so that particular morning, I said, oh, well, my husband's preaching on grace today. He says, grace? What's that? So I was able to explain to him what grace was all about, which we had an amazing conversation. And actually, I'll just tell you this one thing. When I came to this man's house, I'd never met him before, and he'd never met me. And I stood in the doorway of his large bedroom, and as I came in, I stood there, and I looked at him, he sat on his bed. And I said, oh, hello, and I went across to introduce myself. And so we went into the bathroom, and I helped him. And then he sat down, he started talking to me. So as he sat in the bed, he says to me, tell me a bit about yourself. I said, oh, well, what do you want to know? I said, I work for this. I went through the whole... He says, no, there's something else. I says, I go to church. I'm a Christian. He says, I knew it. I knew there was something about you. He said, when you stood in that doorway... Now, bearing in mind, this is somebody who's an atheist and agnostic. He told me that later. He said, when you stood in the doorway, I saw an aura around you. Wow. And he said, I knew there was something different about you. So you see, we never know what we're doing. We never know what we're showing to people. Anyway, I looked after this man, and I went every morning. And do you know the thing he used to say to me? He used to say, I can't believe you're doing this. What? I said, well, he says, no, I don't mean that. He says, I can't believe you're coming here every morning. He says, you're doing this every morning. And it must take you forever to get here, 8 o'clock through the traffic, because he lived out at the other side of the city. I said, well, it's okay. And I thought, well, I didn't want to sound too like, oh, yes, I just love doing it. I said, well, it's my job, and I get paid for it. He says, no. He said, you could do something different than this. He said, you'd get far more. He said, this is limiting you for what you're doing. Every single morning you come in here. He says, I can't believe you're doing this for me. And I really felt it was the right thing to do. But all the conversations we used to have, and he used to instigate a lot of Christian conversations. The one thing he kept saying to me was, I can't believe you're doing this for me. And I know you get paid, and I know about all that. He says, but really, you don't really need to do this. You don't have to do this. You could be doing something else. And that stuck in his mind. And I know it stuck in his mind till the moment he died. Was, I can't believe you're doing this for me. And that used to ring in my head. So all the conversations I had with him, all the things I used to say to him meant nothing compared to what I was actually doing for him. And this is what generosity is all about. It's doing things for people. It's looking like the woman looked at Elisha and said, what can I do for you? How can I'm going to do this for you. She could have bought him anything because she was wealthy. She could have done anything for him and to him. But she met his need. And so sometimes we need to look and watch and hear so we can raise the bar in our generosity. And we can give more than we've ever given before. And we'll have all these blessings come upon us. We'll have all these great things, this protection and these blessings that we all want to have in life on this earth, but also when we go to heaven. And I want to see people. I'm believing, I need to say his name then. I'm believing I'm going to see him. Yeah. I'm believing that he called on the name of the Lord in his dying moments because hopefully of something that he saw in me that drew him to Christ. Not because of what I said, but because of what I was doing for him. You know, the Bible says, give a cup of cold water to the least one of these. It's like giving it unto me. Yeah. So we must never underestimate any menial task, any little thing that we're doing for somebody else, if we're sowing it in generosity, because we're revealing Jesus to them. Yeah. This woman left a legacy because of the simple thing that she saw and acted out. She left a legacy, an important legacy, not just for then, but for the future when she needed to claim her land back for her family and claim her farm back. And then not only did that, which is typical of God, he didn't just give it back to her, he gave her over and abundantly ever that she could have ever asked or thought, because he gave her 7 years worth of finance back to her, which was rightfully hers. So today, let's remember the Shunammite woman who did this, who sowed generously and showed hospitality to someone who was just passing by. And let's sow, not just for now, but let's sow for the future. And let's raise the bar in our generosity.